Hello and welcome back to the Why I Stay podcast, a podcast produced especially for the Cambridge Second Ward. I am here with Kyle Jepson tonight. Kyle, would you like to say hello or something more interesting than that?
Hello, works for me. Hi, everyone.
I always pitch it like, would you like to say something so important? No, hello is great. Kyle is currently serving as the bishop of our ward, but right now we're just going to approach him as Mr. Kyle, if that's okay.
Perfect. Yeah.
I'm just trying to bring this podcast to people's awareness and bring different voices on so that we can try and, I don't know, find unity and relationships outside of church, because we don't see each other very much right now. Well, when we're recording this, it's October of 2020, aka one of the worst years on the record.
Most interesting.
Okay, there we go.
Curveball. The curviest of ball years.
Yes, perfect. I'll say that. It's more positive. I'll just edit out my bad name for it. All right, Kyle. So everybody who comes on this podcast gets a set of rapid fire questions and then a few exploratory questions. And then we all finish out with the same final question. So are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Full name.
Kyle Anthony Jepson.
How old are you?
34.
What's your favorite food?
Grapes.
It sounded like you were kidding, but this is for real, right?
No, grapes are, all kinds of grapes. Grapes are the only thing I've eaten enough of to make myself sick and then still liked afterward.
Okay, so that's the true test.
Yeah.
I did that with cheesecake bites once and I can't have cheesecake anymore.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Favorite TV show or movie?
Go with movie, Big Fish.
Okay. Current hobby?
Well, in the last 6 weeks, I have not had much in the way of hobbies. Now that I'm bishop and my wife has started grad school. But before that, I'm an avid writer. I love to write.
Wonderful. Favorite calling ever?
Singing time leader in primary.
Kyle was singing time leader when I was in there as a primary president.
That's right. Yeah.
So that was
a long
really
time
fun.
ago now.
Yeah, it was a long time ago. Feels like ages ago, actually. But all right, what is a controversial opinion that you hold?
Orange juice should have pulp. Lots and lots of pulp.
Wait a second. Why do you like pulp? Grapes don't have pulp.
Right, but oranges do. And so if you're gonna have orange juice, it has to have pulp in it. Otherwise, I don't know what it is. It's just no, it has to have. It doesn't count as orange juice if it doesn't have pulp in it.
This just blows my mind.
See,
lots and lots of pulp.
Yeah, you came here for controversy. Yeah,
I asked for it. I did.
The country style, where it's basically just slop coming in, someone smashed in orange and put the whole thing in the carton. That's my jam.
When they say country style, it actually, you flash to a countryside where there's just a woman in bare feet, stamping on the oranges, and you're also getting
an olive pressed,
but it's oranges.
Yeah. Has a nice footy flavor.
Anyway, awesome. Well, I'll know who to give my pulpy orange juice to if I ever have it bequeathed upon me, because I would not buy that stuff. All right. What is your biggest dream?
I would love to be a published book writer someday.
Have you talked to Darren Simpson, a former member of our ward, about this?
Not about that, but yeah, he's deep in a young adult fiction, right? That's his thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that's a great dream, and I think more accessible than it has been in the past, just because you can self-publish a little bit more easily now these days than historically. All right, last question. What is something about you that is the same now as it was in high school?
I still can't sing.
You can't sing?
I can't sing.
You were singing time leader.
This musical talent is not required for that calling. It is all just enthusiasm and the love of Jesus.
That is so true.
But yeah, I think I was a senior and I went to a friend's birthday party and we sang happy birthday. And when we were done, the girl standing in front of me turned around and said, "That was really awful." Thanks, Lauren. I was just singing happy birthday to my friend. Now I'm never going to sing in public ever again.
Oh, that breaks my little heart. You should have just taken the cake and right in her face. Sing with this.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I'm glad you continue to sing and that you didn't use your excuse of not being able to sing to keep you from accepting the calling of Ward Primary Chorister.
The thing is, the kids are not judgmental, right?
No.
Like, I would not be the ward choir director like that. I mean, if Bishop Me said, "Hey, I'm calling you to be choir director," I'd say, forget it.
Bishop Me. Well, at least you have a few more years before you have to worry about that potentially happening.
True.
All right, on to exploratory questions. This is just a part of the podcast where we explore your own personal life experiences that have related to the gospel of Jesus Christ. So the first question is, what is one experience that really increased your maturity in the gospel?
Well, I got this new calling recently. But actually, in all seriousness, I'm taking this question broadly because it's not just one experience. But last year, so I can't sing, but I do love music. I was in band all through forever, and like I have ambitions to someday actually be able to play the piano competently, and I enjoy making up songs. But when they announced there's going to be this new hymn book, I was like, I've got to write a hymn, right? I'm a words guy. I'm not
cool.
Really like a music guy, but we have lots of really good music people in our ward. And so I wrote this primary song about doing missionary work because I had been released as singing time leader and called as a ward mission leader. And so that seemed obvious, right? And I wrote my little song and I had kind of a rough tune figured out. And I sent it to Nathan Cordner. And I said, hey, no pressure, but can you do something with this? And in like 24 hours, he sent me a YouTube video of this gorgeous piece of music that like honestly made my lyrics seem shameful in comparison. And so I spent this one afternoon just like trying to get it right, trying to share my testimony of missionary work in rhyme, right?
Yes.
And it just wasn't clicking. And so Nora wanted to go to the YMCA. This was before everything was shut down. And so she and I walked to the YMCA, which is a pretty far walk from my house. I was pushing her in the stroller. And like, I was just praying the whole time, like, what is missionary work? Like, what if I could teach kids in the church around the world what missionary work is, what should it be? And I got this really clear impression that I had thought of missionary work all wrong. And it came to me in rhyming lines. And like, there's just like this stanza in my head was like, wow, I've never thought of missionary work that way before. And I'm pretty sure that's true. Like, I think I just received a revelation through music. And so I submitted that, and then I was so excited. I talked to Jacob Brown, who's also a music guy. I was like, hey, want to help me write a hymn? Because like, I had a really good experience writing a hymn. And so we did it again. And same thing, we wrote a hymn about the atonement and just like grace in our daily life. And same experience, just something about trying to express something through the constraints of like a rhythm and rhyme. Two very important revelatory experiences in my life. And in both cases, it was like someone else, a good friend, had written music that inspired me. And so then I just like started seeking out songs that have no words, right? Just like instrumental jazz pieces. There's one called Stranger on the Shore that I last September-ish, I was going through kind of a hard time. I'm like, I'm going to write words to Stranger on a Shore and see what comes to me. And like, I would call that the most important personal revelation I've ever received in my life. The words to Stranger on a Shore that came to me, like I just held on to that. And anytime I was suffering, I would just sing this song silently in my head. And it got me through so much. And I really thought like, okay, as bishop, I'll just pray about stuff and like maybe I'll sing callings to people, you know. And what I've learned is like personal revelation is really important. Obviously, President Nelson has been encouraging us all to hear him in this case being Jesus. But what I've learned is revelation can be received through counseling with others. When Steve and Hannah and I are discussing callings or the direction of the ward or anything, we'll talk and talk and talk, and then we'll come up with like what we think we're going to do, and then we'll kneel together over Zoom, but still kneeling, and I'll pray, and then we just come to unanimity, or it becomes clear to us that we got something wrong and we need to address it. And and that has really opened my eyes to the power of, I think it's easy for me, because I'm a conceited person, to think that personal revelation, like I now have the ability to ask God questions and he will tell me answers. But like when you bring inspiration together in a group, whether one person is writing music and one person is writing words, or you're three members of a presidency or a bishopric, and you're trying to to come to a unanimous decision, um, much more power is received as more people unite their faith. And my postulate from this, my hypothesis, is that the same is true for married couples, for missionary companionships, for committees in the church. You know, you're on the activities committee. Like I think anytime a group of faithful saints comes together and prays about a thing, there's a lot of revelation to be received that way, because I think it's a much more humble thing to say we as a group want to come together in unity, rather than saying I as an individual want to make a choice, right? And humility is obviously a very important principle of the gospel. And so when you ask about maturity, that's what I think about this thing. I've been learning over the course of the last year or two that salvation is a personal thing. Revelation is a personal thing. But if you can come together with a trusted friend or spouse or a counselor or whatever the case may be, I think that opens up heaven in a way that wouldn't otherwise be possible.
Those are really unique and neat experiences. And another thing that I drew from your examples is that, like, having new experiences can increase your maturity in the gospel. Because up until this point, had you ever tried to put lyrics to something in a spiritual way?
No.
No. And then up until this point, you've never been a bishop before.
Yeah.
And so as we get these learning opportunities in our lives, or even just decide, hey, I'm going to try this, I'm going to try something new, our spiritual capacity and our maturity increases as we rely on the Lord. Yeah, and that's a beautiful thing, to have everybody who has different opinions and different life experiences and different information that they're privy to coming together and then still being able to come to the similar conclusion. I mean, I think is a real testament to the power of the gospel, and that God works through the Holy Ghost and can actually inspire us for what is right. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Ready for question next?
Let's do
Question
it.
2. Okay, what makes you so excited about the gospel of Jesus Christ? Like, what aspects of it really light you up?
I really love so kind of there's this communal aspect which we've all been missing, but we've been doing the best we can over Zoom and other things. But I love that it's not just communal to like the people in our ward, but it's universal too, right? Like when I talk with people at work, if it's like January and we're setting goals and things, like people want to, they have different things they're thinking about, and they might like suggest this, and like, oh, actually, I don't live that way. Like it's all very, take it or leave it. But when we come together in the context of the gospel, like, like faith, repentance, this applies to everybody, right? And when we come together in Sunday school or whatever format, or even just a casual conversation, uh, we can talk about these things we're working on. And there's this expectation that none of us is perfect at it, but we all care about these things, and that it's relevant to each of us, right? Like you would never have a Sunday school conversation and a serious member of the church would be like, actually, I think faith in Jesus is not really for me. Like right? It just wouldn't make sense. We just have this like part of accepting the gospel is that you accept that it is for everyone. And so that really empowers us to be a community who support one another, because we all know at least some subset of the things we're working on, right? Like, oh yeah, we're all working on faith, we're all working on humility and charity, right? Like love, patience, and I love that, because it's just this shared, floor, or I don't know, like a baseline. It's not like if we want to talk about what's meaningful in your life, or how you're trying to develop into a better person, we have zero common ground. Like, no, actually we have a lot in common that we're working on, and we're all working on the same things, and we can learn from each other. And there are no like professionals and novices. Like we're all, nothing compared to God, but we all kind of want to be more like God. And so that's we're all hopefully on the same path, headed in the same direction. And I really like that.
I love the way that you describe that, because a lot of times I've wondered, like, why do I gravitate toward people in our faith, and like, and sometimes like in other Christian faiths as well. I thought like, oh, I need to be a better like missionary and spend more time with people outside of our church group, and that's still true, but I think the way that you described it brings more clarity to me to see like, oh, this is part of my value system. I value that people feel the same way as me on these really basic tenets of how I live my
Yeah.
life. So I'm glad that you brought that up. And I think going and strengthening your faith with the people who believe like you do, and then going out and listening, spending more time listening than talking maybe about other people's faith, listening to what they believe, can help us strengthen, like, okay, actually, no, I totally don't believe what that guy just said. Like, I've had too many experiences that show me that that's not how God operates for me. Which is also something that can help you build your testimony. So I think that's fabulous. Okay, last exploratory question is, what is a scripture that has given you strength recently?
Taking scripture in the broadest sense of the word here, a general conference for me. Maybe I should wrap this up as gospel maturity stuff too. Like, for me, from the time when I got a testimony as a teenager, the Book of Mormon has been the most important part of that. And like, daily Book of Mormon study isn't something I've been awesome at for 20 years. But like, it's been a thing I've been striving for 20 years, right? But in the last year or two, I've learned that layering on top of that regular general conference reading is is that's for me, in the last year or so, where most of the inspiration and like uplift and all the warm fuzzies and the thing we associate with scripture study has come from studying general conference, right? I think I still I would never stop reading the Book of Mormon and just read the general conference addresses. I feel like I need that foundation of consistent Book of Mormon reading, but then general conference is where I've really been lighting up lately. And in the April 2020 general conference, um, which I mean, we're on a podcast, so I'll go confessional here. Like, it was hyped
Yes,
so much,
it was
and
hyped
at
so
the
much.
end of it, I was a little confused and disappointed. Like, I wasn't sure what the big deal was, right? Um,
Same.
and and it was really like, I had already gotten in the motion of like reading all the general conference talks, like getting through general conference multiple times before the next general conference comes. So when that one came out, I was just like, I don't know. Yeah, but I forced myself to read it, and the first time through, like, yeah, kind of, the second time through, kind of, yeah. But then talks started, and by the time October General Conference came around, I was really sad to be done with April General Conference, because there were some
Huh.
talks in there, Elder Anderson's about memories, spiritual memories, and then Elder Renlund's remember the goodness and greatness of God.
Mm-hmm.
There were others also. There were about 5 where I just, in my little gospel library app, as I'm reading them, I'm highlighting. I just went up to the top and highlighted the title to say, like, I'm highlighting the whole talk, right?
Yeah.
And there were about 5 that fell into that category. Which, when I watched General Conference, had no sense that there would be these life changing talks, right? And part of that is like wrestling with kids and stuff. But
Yeah.
I Elder Renlund's talk is so, I don't know. He talks about the reflecting on the goodness and greatness of God, and how it's not for God's benefit, right? It's for our benefit, um, and that is, I've thought about it a lot. I think I've spoken up in Sunday school a couple times about it. We're just like, um, you we have this struggle, I think, a lot, and not just us, but like all of Christianity, of how do we like recognize our nothingness to God, but not hate ourselves,
Sure.
right? And and Elder Renlund's answer is, just reflect on how good God is and how you owe everything to Him, and instead of turning it into some sort of like self-immolation, turn it into praise, right? Just like, everything that's good in my life came from God. How awesome is that, right?
Yeah.
But as I read the talk over and over this last spring, some robins made a nest on our back porch, which was awesome while we were all quarantined and couldn't go anywhere. Like, we were just always peeking up at the robin nest, trying to see how they were doing. And they all 4 of them hatched, and we got to see them learn to fly, and it was wonderful. And there was a part there where, like, as they were getting close to leaving the nest, I set up an iPad and just recorded so I could have it, right? Like I didn't want to miss them leaving in the nest. And then as I was analyzing like 72 hours of footage, right? Like I realized the mom and dad, Robin, during the day, I don't know what nighttime was like because I would take the iPad in and charge it, but during the day, there was, I think the longest stretch of time I found where they didn't show up and feed the babies was like 7 minutes all day long. And it was just like, for me, when I think about like, oh, parenthood is so hard, like, I do not have to feed my children every 7 minutes. Sometimes it feels like it,
It
but
does
like
feel
in
like it sometimes.
reality, like that is not, I am not spending 100% of my time digging worms out of the ground, flying to the nest, dropping it off, and going and doing it again, right? All day
Right.
long. And just one night after having seen all this, I read Elder Renlund's talk, and he's talking about God and how we owe so much to reflect on the goodness and greatness of God, and how like we all have received things that we couldn't do for ourselves. But as I was reading it, I just thought about my parents, right? And just like I can never unindebt myself to my parents, right? And like anyone who is alive owes something to their parents, no matter, like, even if you had terrible parents, which I did not. I am so grateful to my parents. But like, even if someone, like, you are alive to some degree because of your parents. And that, I mean, was 5-ish months ago. And it's really like just changed, especially during this time when I'm stuck at home, right? And my kids are stuck at home and Katie's stuck at home and we're all just home.
Right.
Um, Now is a great time for us to get tired of each other, right? And I haven't, because of this perspective from Elder Renlund's talk. And it's not even the point he was trying to make, but just like that really changed things for me. And and so I'm grateful for the little Robin family. I'm grateful for Elder Renlund, and I'm grateful for my parents. And I really love my kids, and I'm grateful like I have a wife. I'm not doing this alone, right? And it's helped me to cherish this time.
And I want to add my second witness to rereading General Conference talks, and especially that Goodness and Greatness of God one by Renland. It's done the same thing for me, actually. And I came upon it a few months ago when I was feeling kind of low about like, oh, my situation's the worst, which it's not. It really isn't.
No.
And so it was able to give me, God was able to give me better perspective through that talk. So I'll add my second witness to that. This has been awesome. Okay. So the final question to wrap it all up that everybody gets when they come on this podcast is this: why do you stay in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints?
It's just so much a part of me at this point. Like I have had low points with the church. Usually they don't last more than like an afternoon or a week,
Mm.
but like there was like a few months when I was really struggling with some pieces of church history, not long after Paul was born, so probably like 5-6 years ago now. And I would think sometimes, like, what if I left? Like, what if I did? And then I would just pay attention to. I actually I don't want to give myself credit for it. I think God started whispering to me a little bit, like, oh, you know what? As I was a student at the time. As I walk to and from campus, I pray, right? Like I just talk to God and I ask questions, and like, well, that's part of being a member of the church, right? And like, there are just so many little things like that that are just a part of who I am. That like I could, maybe I could stop going to church. I mean, I don't think I could ever get the church out of me, right? And I bet if I tried to leave, um, I would realize how much I was missing. And this pandemic is really, like, there are things I miss. This last Sunday, hearing crystal calm organ arrangements, right? Like hearing a Nathan and Greer Cordner musical duet, right? Like it almost brought me to tears because that's a cherished part of being a member of the Cambridge Second Ward, right? And that is something you can't get when you do the sacrament at home. And so like I don't know. There was a time in my life, and I think lots of people go through this intellectual thing where like there's the church and the gospel is perfect, and the church is imperfect. And like for me, like no, like it's a package deal. You don't really get one without the other. And like yeah, we need to be forgiving of each other. And yeah, there may be policies and things we struggle with. And yeah, bits of our history are a little complicated, but there's no getting around. If you believe this is the restored gospel of Jesus Christ, the church is a vital part of that, right? Like you can't drink water without a cup, really, and like no use disparaging the cup.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going anywhere. I will be here for a very long time.
I'll hold you to that. I'll hold you to it.
Please do.
Got it on recording,
Yeah,
so there's
yeah,
no
yeah.
going back.
If something disastrous, if I lose my mind at some point, yeah, just send me this recording. It'll probably just make me angry, but then I'll come around and thank you, I'm sure.
Well, Kyle, thank you so much for your experiences and your testimony and for taking the time to come on here with us today. I think it's really important that we each get our voices heard and bear our testimonies and say it out loud and recall and to remember and cement those things in our mind that have really shaped us and carry us onward. So thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, everybody. That was my interview with Kyle Jepson. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I hope that as you go throughout this week, that you will remember the goodness and greatness of God and that you will see how much he really does feed you moment by moment, even more than those Robin parents, that he really does more for you and for me than we ever could repay or realize. And as we do that, I think we'll be happier and we can share that with others. So anyway, have a great week. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.